What's up everybody, Coach Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video, and I got a question for you. Have you ever popped off one game, and then the immediate next game, you just can't seem to win a duel? You were just fragging out in the previous game, but then all of a sudden, you're like bottom frag Andy, and everyone is just yelling at you or complaining and calling you boosted, or whatever the case may be. It's frustrating, right? How you can be so inconsistent from one game to the next. Well, in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the 7 reasons why you are inconsistent and different things that you can do to iron those out so that you can become that consistent god and climb, carrying all your teammates, climb straight to Immortal and beyond. And I know you want that, so watch it to the end of the video. And the GameLeap.com website is going to help you on your journey to Immortal or even Radiant with in-depth VOD reviews, advanced tips and tricks, character map, and game sense guides. We got it all at the GameLeap website, so do yourself a favor and go check it out in the links down below. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. Now, something important before we even jump into the video that we got to distinguish: there are 2 types of inconsistencies, and they stem from different things. There is, first off, individual inconsistency, which is you walk around a corner and you try to hit a headshot and you kill that person, and then in the immediate next game, you try for the exact same thing and you just can't hit that shot because your mechanical skills are inconsistent. That is the first section. Now, the second thing you gotta understand is the inconsistency of a play being a success or a failure. And these are 2 different things, because that second thing directly has to do with how enemies interact with you and how your plans interact with enemies' plans. And that leads us directly into the first reason why you're so inconsistent, and that is playing in a way that only works versus someone who doesn't punish. Have you ever taken a flank and you flanked up against 4 people and you just got a 4K because none of them were paying attention to you, right? That's an insane play. Or maybe you jump op peeked an enemy. They were holding an angle, you jump op peeked them, and you had enough time to flick up to them and kill them and win that duel. That's insane, right? Now, I am sure though that you have tried these exact same things, and instead of the flank working, you got spotted out and killed without you being able to do anything. When you've tried to jump op peek someone, you just got shut down right away. The thing that you need to understand is sometimes these plays work and sometimes they don't. And let's go back to that op example, right? You save up for an op and you try to jump op peek the first person. Whether you win or lose that first one can have ramifications for your economy down the line. And if you can't win any of the jump op peek duels, then all of a sudden you're just actually bottom fragging a game, where if you were actually winning these duels, you would be top fragging. And that's what you need to understand. Some plays are not going to work against everybody. Playing overly aggressive, playing in a way that doesn't respect your enemy. All it takes is one person. It just takes one person to wait for your flank. It just takes one person to react accordingly to you jump peeking, because honestly, the person that's holding the angle has the advantage. Whatever the case may be, you got to understand that just because something worked in the previous game doesn't mean it will work against better opponents or even just slightly different-minded opponents in the next game. And that is one of the big reasons why it feels like everything is so inconsistent in Valorant, because you will be doing the exact same thing you did in the last game, but in the last game you popped off, got 30 kills, and in this game you get 5. And that is why adaptation is so important. If you are trying to do what you did in the last game and it doesn't work, do what high-level pro players do and always adapt and change their playstyle game to game. They are not just playing one playstyle always. They always adapt to the enemies, the situation, and anything that can happen. And if one play goes wrong, they're making instant adaptations for the next round, because you got to remember, if you want to climb, consistency is the most important, and you cannot afford to just get farmed every other game. It's not going to help you climb, and you're just going to be stuck at your rank forever. Now, moving on to the next reason why you're inconsistent, and this is the individual consistency section, and this is poor settings. So the first thing that you need to be mechanically consistent is proper sensitivity. And I'm not going to break down like what exact sensitivity you should pick, but I am going to tell you that your sensitivity should use all 3 zones of your arm. It should use your arm for big movements like 180ing on flashes. It should use your wrist for on-screen tracking and small flicks, and it should use your fingers for minute changes. This is pretty much the default strategy for every pro FPS aimer. And the reason that you do this is because think about your arm, right? You could think about your arm itself as like a big paintbrush, your wrist as a medium-sized paintbrush, and your fingers as a small paintbrush, right? If you have your sensitivity too high, the only thing you're ever going to be able to use is, you know, that medium and that small, or because your sensitivity is higher, it's more like having like one medium-sized paintbrush and one large paintbrush and no small paintbrush, and you just got to give yourself more tools. That's what I'm trying to tell you. more tools to aim means more accuracy, and that's why you should find a sensitivity that gives you a balance of using all 3 zones. And if you have that, you'll be golden regardless of what sensitivity you'll pick. Now, on top of that, you got to make sure that you keep your sensitivity the same. Once you pick that sensitivity, do not move it around like crazy unless your name is Tens, who basically changes his sense every single day. But for the rest of us mortals, we cannot change our sensitivity because it's going to mess up our muscle memory. It's going to make us miss shots and be just generally inconsistent. So pick a sensitivity, stick with it for at least a good while before you decide to switch it again. Now, you also need a consistent mouse, a mouse that you really like and that you've been using for a while, and a mouse that you think fits the way that you aim or how you like to aim. Now, that being said, one thing that you should really pay attention to is the weight of your mouse, because that's really the most important thing when it comes to mice and personal preference. If you like lighter mouses or heavier mouses, try different styles and find the one that you like so that you know which one you prefer and which one that you should go to, especially when you're trying to move on to new mice. That can really affect your consistency, because if you switch to a different mouse and it is like way heavier, it might take you tons of time to relearn everything. So definitely keep the weight in mind. Now, the last thing about poor settings and just sensitivity in general is try to use the same sensitivity across FPS games. This is so important. If you're popping on over to Overwatch or CS or maybe even Fortnite, I know it's not an FPS, but it is a shooter. If you're hopping over to these games and you're changing your sensitivity, that is messing up your muscle memory just inherently. You don't even know it. Now, personally though, if you want to climb as far as possible in Valorant, I actually would suggest not playing any other FPS game, period. I mean, seriously, I would suggest not playing other FPS at all because it can actually hurt your improvement. But I'm going to talk about that in another video later on. But just generally, if you are playing other FPS games, make sure that you're matching your sensitivity cross game. Now, moving on to the next reason why you're inconsistent all the damn time, and it's not warming up. Come on, guys, you got to warm up. You got to do metaphorical stretches, okay? You need to find a specific warm-up routine. That's the first thing. You don't want to have to spend like 2 hours warming up. You need to find a warm-up routine that you really like and that you repeat every single time before you warm up. Now, what you should be doing in your warm-up routine is 1, practicing the type of movements you should do in game. You should make sure to practice your tracking, your flicking, and different types of movements. Practice 180 flashing, practice counter strafing, practice flicking from one target to the next. Just have a practice regimen, and yes, you can practice in Kovacs or even warm up in Osu or whatever the case may be, but make sure that you have a certain amount of warm-up practice in game, because that's the best way to actually make sure that you're fully warmed up, is by actually doing your training in game, because that's the only way to replicate what an actual game feel will actually, be like. And then the last thing you got to do in warm up is make sure that you're practicing the different types of weapons you're going to be using, because all the weapons are different, whether it's the Sheriff, the Ghost, the Operator, the Vandal, the Phantom, the Bulldog. Make sure you put in time and effort and practice each of these, because there could be one round of one particular game that you pick up a Bulldog, and if you convert on this one kill, you win the round, and then your entire team builds that snowball and you just like win 3 rounds because of it. But because you didn't practice the Bulldog, you pick it up and you like whiff on like someone right in front of you, and then it just, it goes in the other direction. So you got to understand that putting time and effort into practicing the most used guns is going to pay off dividends down the line and just make you a more consistent player as well. Now, moving on to the 5th reason why you're inconsistent, and this is not understanding the matchups or even thinking about them. This is so important to do because you got to understand that, just like we talked about before, where certain playstyles of the enemy can just shut down your plays just outright, there are certain playstyles of an enemy character that can actually shut down an entire section of your play. For example, you're up against a Cypher or a Killjoy, or maybe even both. You cannot flank on Haven. I'm telling you, if you try to flank on Haven, there's going to be traps, there's going to be a turret. You're just never going to be able to pull it off, and you're going to end up in all these scenarios where you're not with your team when you need to, you're flanking or getting caught out. Enemies might even be waiting for you and using their turret to potentially make a play on you. I mean, it's just going to be a nightmare, and you got to understand this right off the bat. If an enemy has a predominant playstyle that shuts off an axis of your play, you need to think about that ahead of time, because if you try to play into it, you're just going to feed and die and not get any value. But on the flip side of this, if you're playing against a composition that has no Cypher and no Killjoy, for some reason, not playing either of these, you could be like, I can flank this composition every single round because they have to leave a body. As long as I check these hot zones, make sure no one's there, they cannot just leave something behind to guard the flank, and that is incredibly powerful. So you as a player being able to identify that beforehand will allow you to adapt your playstyle early. You don't have to like actually try to make a play and then get shut down for you to adapt. You can adapt it before you even try. You'd be like, I'm not even going to try for that play because I know that they're going to shut it down with that character pick, that predominant meta character strategy. Now moving on to the next reason that you're so damn inconsistent in Valorant, and this is something that is true specifically with Valorant that makes it so hard to be consistent in as compared to other games like CS or even just other FPSs in general, is that there's weapon use and ability use, and they both require so much of you. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever played a new character for the first time, and then all of a sudden it seems like you can't win gunfights in the game while you're trying to figure that character out? That is because you have so much abilities to worry about at the same time as your gunplay, and it's too hard to use them both at the same time. You basically need to get to the point where you're using your abilities without even thinking about them. They're a natural part of your interaction, and you're not whipping out your recon arrow as an enemy whips around the corner. You're not trying to figure out the perfect place for a trap as a jet flies into you. You need to become unconscious competent at using these different abilities in conjunction with your weapons. And this is why I think players that really try to fill all the time or have way too big of an agent pool, they're really going to be hurting themselves, and they're not going to be able to actually get to that point where they never have to think about their abilities. And a lot of people think, hey, once I get the gunplay down and I understand the abilities, I can just jump from character to character. But it really isn't that way, because if you don't reach that unconscious competence status that I talked about with abilities, you're never going to be able to be as confident mechanically as well. So that is one of the really important fundamental aspects of Valorant. Try to hone your agent pool. I would suggest not really playing more than 3 agents. You never need to know more than 3 agents in my opinion, and then just master those agents and you're going to be way more consistent. Now moving on to the last reason that you are being very inconsistent in your games, and this could cost you a ton of games, and this is an underrated factor that people don't talk about enough, and it's out-of-game factors. Maybe you feel anxiety about things you have to do, or extremely stressed. Or maybe you're super sleep deprived, cracked out, snorting G Fuel every night. Whatever the case may be, you need to make sure that all these out-of-game factors are in order, because you might not even realize how much they affect your in-game performance. If you are even a little bit tired, that can be the difference between like 3 or 4 duels in the entire game, and that might not seem a lot, but that can snowball exponentially. I mean, 4 more deaths can turn into 8 more deaths, can turn into 12 more deaths, and a whole bunch of lost rounds because of just the economy aspect of it. So you got to understand that that is incredibly important to maintain and control. Realize when your actual body is going to prevent you from playing at your peak, and then just treat it just like a actual sports athlete would, or anyone else. Controlling these out-of-game factors will just make you a more consistent player. And then the last bit of this is make sure that your start position is always consistent. Consistency in game comes from consistency outside. So we talked about consistent sleep schedule, consistent state of mind, but make sure you also have a consistent starting position, distance from your desk, distance from your monitor, where your mouse is centrally located, where your keyboard is centrally located. Everything should be exactly the same. So there's no deviation. Remember from like high school, the control group, right? All of those factors should not be changed, and the experiment, which is your consistency, should be something that you're changing in game, but you got to make sure that everything outside of the game is consistent always, whether it's your state of mind or start position or whatever. But the GameLeap website has all the tools to make you the most consistent powerhouse on the planet. With in-depth psychology, aim guides, and mechanical courses, we got everything you need, in-depth guides to make sure that you climb the ranks of Valorant with ease. So do yourself a favor and go check it out in the links down below. Thanks so much for coming by. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. That's all I got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.